We've assembled a panel again. Ole, Cody, Beth, welcome back to the show, guys. How's everybody doing today?
Pretty good, thanks.
Good.
Yeah, thanks for having us on again. Me anyway.
Right. Cody, you're still enduring the fires there in Colorado, right?
Yeah, one of them is the biggest one ever in state history, and then the Cameron Peak fire, they're calling it now, is putting out a lot of smoke in the area. My voice is, kind of messed up, but I'm sitting here with an air purifier, and I hope you can hear me okay.
Wow. Yeah, we hear you well, but I mean, biggest fire in Colorado history versus air purifier. I don't know. I wish you well. That sounds really bad.
Well, there's a lot of smoke and particulate debris in the air, and we're just trying to do the best we can. And I got a copy of the book that Beth was talking about last time, The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. And I have it right here, and I've been reading it. It's wonderful, and the archetype stuff is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And that's what we were talking about quite a bit last week, archetypes. And for the first time, many people met Beth Martens. Beth, you've done a lot of writing about archetypes, and we had a great conversation last week. Do you want to give everybody just a brief overview of this book, The Power of Myth, the archetype conversation we were having last week, and the types of things that you deal with on your website, bethmartens.com?
Yes, sure. I'm not actually specifically familiar. I haven't read that book, so I can't give you a brief overview, but I am familiar with Joseph Campbell's work, and he was the one that he probably publicized rather than discovered the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is the big archetype. It's the archetype of all archetypes within which the others fit. And it's the journey that every human being is called to on this earth. Either you accept the calling or you reject the calling. And either way, you actually are still in that archetype. You can't get away from it. It's just who you are.
And we had a great conversation last week. If anybody missed that, I encourage them to go back and take a look. And then Beth, you and I were speaking on your channel. You do a lot of amazing stuff. Ole, thank you for introducing us to Beth. We wanted to talk today about the media industrial complex, and are they programming people's thoughts, maybe taking us out of these archetypes that are perhaps more in line with our natural personalities and tendencies. Ole, you've done a ton of work on this media industrial complex. What do you think?
I tell you, I interviewed a person the other day who was, she spent a big part of her life in advertising and marketing. And she told me that all marketing is based on problem, reaction, solution. And I was not aware of that at all. So that makes it really interesting. She said it's just called something else. It's sort of like find a need for the product or create a need. That's the problem. Then I think she said aggravate the situation or the interest, stir it up, and then you have the product already waiting to then be served when the need has been created. And this is exactly it. It's the old Romans, here we go again. But what we are seeing now is the exact same scenario being played out, but where the product they're offering us is the New World Order agenda, horror nightmare, whatever. So it's like, I think really, really important to become aware of these methods that are being used against us.
Absolutely. Ole, are you familiar with this guy? I'm showing a picture of an individual named Elmer Davis right now.
No.
Elmer Davis was the head of the War Information Office during World War II, which propagandized basically everybody into whatever it is that they wanted people to believe. Elmer Davis said that it was much easier to propagandize people through entertainment than it was through news, because you can teach somebody something when they don't realize they're being taught. And there's been so much talk about how Hollywood and the mainstream news. I mean, there seem to be so many similarities between entertainment and news these days. Some of the same individuals appear there, and the news is driven by, I mean, Ole, you're telling us this advertising person told us about the agenda for advertisers. Well, what pays for the news but advertising?
Mm. Yeah, and also when you look at these big companies, where do they come from? Where did the radio come from? Where did television come from? It's military industrial complex. It's the military technology that has worked in war zones, and then, well, let's do something else with it when there's so-called peace at the moment, and then they've started attacking the population instead to control and persuade us to accept more and more of their agenda. So it's the same old story, and that is why I think it's super interesting with your background in Hollywood, with Cody's background as well. And so we come from so different angles, and that's why I love bringing people like this together now with Beth as well, with the archetypes, because it just all fits together, but in an invisible network that most people are not aware of. Yeah. So this is what I want to pull the curtain away so that you can clearly see, now I see what's going on. That is the purpose.
Absolutely. Beth, what do you think? Media industrial complex.
Exactly. So they have the playground of the human psyche at their fingertips. And the human psyche is very easily communicated with. It's very easy to suggest things to, a brief image. It can be even an image that you're not aware of having seen. That's how they've used a lot of subliminal stuff, whether it's audio or visual, symbols and numbers, inversions of symbols and numbers. They're all the makings of the programming that ends up embedded in our own psyches. Now they're playing at the level of the archetypes, that blueprint of human purpose and meaning and consciousness. And we are hardwired for both the awakening and also the deep unconscious. And so all of that is fertile ground to come along and implant the thing that is not wanted. Now, it was described to me, hard to say whether this is true or not, that we actually started to program ourselves in order to not have to think when we beat our heart or breathe our lungs or metabolize nutrients from our food, right? That a certain amount of automation had to come into play in order to just exist without it, being a 24-hour job to stay alive. And then the story was told, this is by Lester Levinson, God knows it's impossible to prove, but that we just went too far. We kept automating and automating and automating and put so many things on the back burner of the unconscious that most of us, 95% of our awareness is in the unconscious. And so it's very easy to manipulate. Right? You can't manipulate somebody who's aware that watches the news and says, "Oh, I know that technique. That's problem reaction solution. They made me feel like there was something wrong with me," and then they heroically show up with the solution. So we are fodder at this stage, and the way I consider myself an expert in decoding, number one, and then deprogramming, number two, because all of this is taking place here. It's not really out there. That's, it's not something to be afraid of, but also I would recommend your listeners minimize their exposure to all of that in the media, in the mainstream news, because it does get in. Even watching a single movie, I can see after the effect on my own consciousness. I have to deprogram from that experience that I'm not used to anymore. And there are specific programs also that I'd love to talk about some of them in detail because they are highly recognizable. Once you see them, then you're in a powerful place to be able to take them out. If you don't see them, you cannot do one thing about them.
That makes a lot of sense, Beth, because, for me, when I started doing this show and getting involved in broadcasting on YouTube and stuff, I had never heard about social engineering or any of this. And so not knowing anything about it, when it's being used to try to damage me, I don't know what's going on. But when you learn, first you got to figure out what it is you're dealing with and then unravel it. So that, sort of gets us past step one. The other important thing is that we're going to get into great detail on this topic when we continue with our sponsor-exclusive segment on patreon.com/lightonconspiracies, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We're also going to be simulcasting this on Beth's Patreon page that people can get to by going to patreon.com/Beth Martens. Welcome again to the show, Beth. Ole, everything okay? I think your background is flipped.
Well, what can I say?
This way people know we're authentic. We're not programming people. We're just struggling to get our own program together. There we go. Perfect.
I think Skype is having a problem with their new technology here. But do you know, I heard this, I watched this video interview with a woman who had been part of a satanic cult, that she had been abused from a young age. She was sort of like, she had some psychic abilities, and that was really highly valued in this area. So she was taken in and put through all kinds of horror, and I mean, awful, awful, awful. But one of the things she said was the way they sort of tie you into the whole thing is that they put you in all kinds of, or put you through all kinds of traumatic events, but like, for instance, electric shocks and so, and then the person that is doing it to you, as soon as it stops, no one else is allowed to touch that person, the target sort of, but the person who's doing it, that they want to become your handler, goes forward and hugs you and holds you. And even though, she said, even though the mind understands that he just tortured me, there's this connection on a cellular level that it becomes like almost like an obsession, like a more than a love affair. It's like a incredible need to please this person, to get their approval, and that makes them totally in control, let them be controlled by that person. And this is where I think, when I look at a lot of these things, you know, like we have a mass shooting, for instance, and I mean, I'm one of the people that are speaking about light and love and compassion and all these things, but I come from a point where I mean it. Then you have the people carrying out these operations, and I thought that they are sort of trying to hijack these words so that we can't really use them anymore, because there's a lot of these fake events, staged mass shootings and so on, where witnesses and victims, the first they say, yes, I was shot six times, don't worry, I took an aspirin, I'm fine, I don't need surgery. But apart from that, we need to forgive them. We need to we need to spread love. We need forgive them. Or they're using these things, and I was thinking, is that what they're doing? Is that why they're doing it? You know, first they hit us, and we're like, oh, and then they said, no, but love us, because. And I'm like, it's not up to you to tell anyone to forgive anything, because you're the ones who did it. But they're sort of, I think that's how they're doing. They're connecting or with us, our psychic somehow. So I thought that was super interesting.
Is that Stockholm Syndrome?
I guess you could say it in one way. I'm not sure, Beth or Cody, maybe you know better.
Yeah, that's it falls under the blanket of Stockholm Syndrome, where a person that's being tortured or harassed actually begins to identify with the torturers. That happened to some of our American POWs in the Korean conflict and the Vietnam conflict and so forth. So military intelligence has used that Stockholm Syndrome to their advantage on a number of occasions.
Mm-hmm. And Cody, what do you say about propaganda? And I mean, we've spoken about it a bit, but you know, the experience that you've had has been quite specialized. Was it accompanied by mass propaganda events, and what was the nature of it, if it was?
Yeah, we have a whole. I got a lot of information, and stuff here, and maybe on the Patreon portion we can talk more about it, so we won't be censored by YouTube. Excuse me. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, mind control, like Beth was talking about, mind control is a big thing, and it ties right into the, the CIMK Ultra program, the 149 sub-projects they had in there. And I have a quote here from Carl Jung, which is just what Beth was talking about. He said, the subliminal aspects of everything that happens to us may seem to play very little part in our daily lives, but they are the almost invisible roots of our conscious thoughts. And when we're awake, we have the conscious mind, but the subconscious, approximately 95% of our brain, it's always activated under the surface. And this is what Beth was talking about when they try to manipulate and control your propaganda using a military intelligence way as a way to get your enemy to surrender or lose his will to fight, so that you don't have to actually, drop bombs or whatever. And it's become quite sophisticated, which is the offspring of the Stargate program, the MK Ultra, and all that other stuff. So they use Jungian psychology, subliminals, archetypes, anything to their advantage to get a military edge. The Chinese, the Russians, the Americans, British, they're all doing it.
And Cody, what do you think about this latest announcement from Elon Musk's Neuralink company that they've actually installed a chip into the brain of a pig, where so far they've demonstrated the ability to read brain waves from the pig. There are 1,024 microscopic electrodes that literally poke right into the brain tissue, and I think each one of them can stimulate or read the stimulus from a neuron in the brain. What do you think about this level of direct interface? I mean, it seems like MK Ultra and these other things are chemical-based programs that are kind of poking around in the dark, and now it appears we may, for the first time, have a direct plug, literally, right into the brain. What are the implications for manipulating people's minds with that kind of technology?
Well, the implications are absolutely horrifying. When you insert physical objects in the brain that serve as electromagnetic transducers or receivers, like this pig thing that Elon Musk is doing, that's a whole nother level of psychotronics. Psychotronics is psychological manipulation by electronic means, like modulating microwaves externally to affect the endocrine system, like the pineal gland, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, and so forth, and create hormonal changes and serotonin, melatonin, neurotransmitter imbalances in the brain. That's one way. There's psychic driving that was tested up there in Beth's neck of the woods at that Allen Memorial Institute there, McGill University. We talked about that in the last show. And so this new stuff of putting in some type of device or even nanotechnology with nanoparticulates serving as electric or magnetic transducers of an external signal, all of this stuff is absolutely horrifying. And when you think about the AI computers that could be programmed to self-program themselves in a feedback loop with devices like Elon Musk is using, this opens up a whole new can of worms for the Pandora's box of mind control, and it is an extension, by the way, of some of these CIA operations that were conducted in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s.
Wow.
I also want to say that this is absolutely nothing new. Like Cody says, I think it was already in the 50s. There was especially one doctor that was contracted by the CIA, Jose Manuel Rodriguez Delgado, who he was a Spanish professor in neurophysiology at the Yale University. And one of the things that he became famous for was to be able to control a bull in a bullfighting ring type of thing. To first, when it started attacking, he could, with a remote control, just turn off the aggressivity, so that he just totally stopped in the attack and was diverted away.
Wow, that's amazing. I think you've mentioned this guy before.
Yeah, this was controlled through electrical stimulation of the brain. That I don't know the exact how they did it, but it had sort of like a thing on the top of his head, and you can see it. It was filmed and everything. You see the bull start charging, and then he'd press the button, and boom, it just stops.
Wow.
So nothing new under
Discover
the sky.
magazine from 2016 has an article, "The Man Who Fought a Bull with Mind Control." That's amazing. There he is. Jose M.R. Delgado steps into a Spanish bull ring as a bold demonstration of his research. Yale University.
He was from Ronda, which is just a stone throw away from here.
Huh.
Press that, check out the video.
He's got an electromagnetic mind control thing. Well, I think we should check this out on Patreon, because playing other videos on YouTube is just another excuse that they use to try to shut us down. See, and I think that one of the issues that we're running into, Ole, is that we're talking about how this media industrial complex is programming people's thoughts by presenting them with information that is intended to be true, and it causes people to believe that things that are false are actually true. This is social engineering at its finest. It's funded by these large corporations. That's the industrial complex part of it. But what we're trying to do is to break that down, and I think that might be one of the reasons why the president of television doesn't like this show. It's important for viewers who want this information to recognize we got to break this cycle of this industrial complex, and by providing direct-to-viewer sponsorship, I seriously think that's what they hate. So people who join us on patreon.com/lightonconspiracies, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and of course on patreon.com/Beth Martens. Ole, have you activated Subscribestar? I can never remember.
I have, but I haven't really looked into it. I'm overloaded all the time.
But the point is, by delivering this content directly to our viewer sponsors, eliminating this corporate sponsorship step, people have the confidence that we're not being influenced by these companies that want to subliminally insert ideas and get them to install chips in their pigs' brains or whatever it is that they might want people to do. So we'll be back in just about 5 minutes on Patreon and Subscribestar. We're going to go in depth on some of these topics. Thanks everybody on the panel for joining. I look forward to the next hour, and thanks to the generous Patreon and Subscribestar sponsors who make this show possible. We'll see everybody in a few minutes.